Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Hello and thank you for joining us for Newsmakers. On the program today, we feature a conversation about business and trade at the border. Joining us is Jerry Pacheco, president of the Border Industrial Association and executive director of the International Business Accelerator. Mr. Pacheco also pens a syndicated column, Business Across the Border. Jerry, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having me, Anthony.
Now, the Albuquerque Journal recently reported that exports from New Mexico grew at 46% last year to a new record of $5.4 billion. And the Journal reported that much of that growth was due to the activity in Santa Teresa. And now I'd like to hear from you on the ground there. What activities are really happening to spur that growth?
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. We hit a record year in 2021. That's the most we've ever exported out of the state of New Mexico. And what accounts for that is every company that we recruit to Santa Teresa, the Santa Teresa industrial base, almost every company is an exporter. And they're supplying, let's say, the Mexican maquiladora or twin plant industry. Some are having product made in Mexico. It's finished here or finished in Mexico. And then from here, it's exported to the world. This is truly becoming a major production distribution center on the entire U.S.-Mexico border.
So what are some of the industries that are really interested in what you're doing there and the location right now?
We have a lot of electronic components, for example. We're tied into Foxconn, which is just on the other side of the border. They've got about 1.5 million square feet of production space, and they're doing up to 70,000 computers a day. And by the way, they just broke ground a few weeks ago on another 1.2 million square feet expansion. So wow. Our export base is going to grow even more because whenever something happens on the Mexican side of the border, we tend to get a piece of it on this side of the border also. So electronics are big. We have a big automotive component here. We have a lot of packaging. We make a lot of cardboard for boxes and a lot of shipping protective gear here. We also have a lot of metal fabrication, metal stamping, plastic injection, anything that you need to make a product and put it in a box, we have it here in Santa Teresa.
So what are the advantages of being on the border there with U.S. and Mexico? What are the advantages?
Well, you get the best of both worlds. There are some products that are going to be made more economically in Mexico, especially if they have a large labor component. But we still get a piece of that because if something's being made in Mexico, they're going to need our components. They're going to need our fabricated metal. They're going to need our boxes to put that product in. So it's truly a symbiotic relationship with Mexico, and our proximity to the border here at Santa Teresa with our own port of entry, which is the fastest crossing port of entry for commercial shipments, gives us a tremendous advantage on the U.S.-Mexico border.
Now, on the other side of the border in Mexico is San Jeronimo. How important is that relationship with the community there?
Well, we have a group called Los Santos, which is comprised of the landowners on the Mexican side of the border in San Jeronimo, on the U.S. side of the border in Santa Teresa. And myself, I'm not a landowner, but I sit on the board and my staff acts like the executive staff. We meet on a monthly basis to discuss infrastructure planning. We meet to discuss marketing, politics, because politics change on both sides of the border, and you have to keep up on that because you have to line up projects simultaneously or concurrently on both sides of the border. So you have to have real good communication with your partner on the Mexican side, and we truly do.
Now, having that partnership, how do you make sure that communication stays strong and as these times are really unforeseen because we have the pandemic, that is sort of winding down in a lot of people's eyes. But we also have other issues that you mentioned, political issues. So what are some things that you continue to do to ensure that the communication relationships stay strong?
Well, one of the things we do is we share our prospects. We don't, sometimes on this side of the border, we have to use a code name or what have you. But sometimes when the prospects open about wanting to come to the region, we work together to see if we can land that prospect on both sides of the border. And then we're planning infrastructure on both sides of the border, because whatever occurs on the Mexican side can affect us on this side. Right now we're planning, we got funding in the last legislative session and the special session to construct a brand new border highway that's going to run parallel to the border wall, heading east from the port of entry down to Sunland Park and connecting to the Southern Beltway in El Paso. That's going to give us a connection from East El Paso all the way to Santa Teresa along the border. That affects San Jeronimo, because a lot of people will want to cross there now because at San Jeronimo and Santa Teresa, because they can proceed directly east on that highway. We hope to have that done within a year.
Now, you were quoted in that same journal article as saying at a recent economic forum that, quote, "We're kind of a sleeping giant down there. We're bigger than the state film industry and the New Mexico spaceport in terms of economic impact," end quote. What did you mean by that?
Let me explain that. Last year, the Border Industrial Association worked with New Mexico State University's Center for Business Economic Development and Arrowhead Center. And those two New Mexico State entities did an independent study of the economic impact of that Santa Teresa has on an annual basis on the state economy and the region. And the study concluded that we support almost 6,000 jobs in this industrial base, and we add about $1.1 billion to the region's economy, more than 900 of which accrues directly to New Mexico and a little bit to West Texas. The Spaceport did its independent study last year. From the 12 or 15 years since it's been founded, it concluded that during that period of time, it's added about $1 billion to the state's economy, which is great. The film industry also did its own independent study and concluded that it contributes about $800 million a year to the state economy. So if you consider all the three studies, we are bigger than film or the space industry, Spaceport America, contributing to the state's economy. But we're not in a competition here. Each sector is very exciting, and I'm all about diversification. We have to diversify the state's economy. Spaceport America, I'm a big supporter. Film, we need more of that. And we'll continue to grow what I call the meat and potatoes, which is the industrial base here in Santa Teresa.
Now, that industrial base also offers some jobs that are paying much higher than minimum wage in our area. Can you share a little bit about wages and the opportunities there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it would be very unusual for somebody to earn less than $15 an hour starting. That's a factor of companies looking for talent and wanting to secure talent, but it's also a factor of what's going on during the pandemic and this time of crisis. So you won't find anybody here paying $11.50 an hour, which is our minimum wage in Santa Teresa right now. And because we have tremendous expansion, if you consider that Foxconn, as I mentioned, is building another 1.2 million to its production plant, Sunrise Confectionery is a big gummy bear manufacturer on the other side of the border. They just opened up last year with 220,000 square feet of space. They just announced that they're going to add another 280,000. On this side of the border in Santa Teresa, we have two independent companies. One is building a 365,000 square foot speculative building. That's a building you build without having a tenant. You build it and go find the tenant. And another company is building a 135,000 square foot building. So if you add up all the space under construction, there's almost 2 million square feet of space on both sides of the border being constructed as we speak. That impacts the labor. We need people to come up on the hill, I call it the hill here, and contribute to the growth of this area. So we have to pay good wages in order to attract that talent.
So attracting talent, what are some of the challenges in bringing in an educated workforce that you need to really fill those jobs?
Manufacturing is getting more sophisticated, as are logistics. It's very demanding of people. That we have things called digital manufacturing, where you're using computer programs to control machines and produce your product. Logistics are tied in globally, so you need to attract talent that is capable of creating products and moving them, and that takes a good wage, a good work environment, benefits, all the things that you and I want to stay in our positions.
Now we're in this time where a lot of folks are resigning from their jobs. So has the Great Resignation played an impact in perhaps filling essential roles there in the area?
I think it's impacted us as much as everybody else. We're actively trying to promote this place as a good place to work. The perception was a while back, and I think it's kind of diminished now, that Santa Teresa was so far away from the El Paso metropolitan area, or so far away from Las Cruces, and we're really not. We abut El Paso, and we're very well connected. But labor is an issue, but I think it's an issue almost everywhere.
So during the pandemic, obviously the state took a hit with its economy. How did it really affect what you're doing there at the border?
You know, I got that question a lot during 2020 and, when 2021 emerged. And the general question was, have you guys reopened? And my answer was, we never shut down, because everything that you and I bought during the pandemic, when we were, sequestered at our homes or apartments and ordering Amazon, a lot of that stuff comes out of this industrial base. You need electronics for your handheld, whatever, consumer electronics. You're buying an auto, or you're repairing your car, or you're upgrading your house. We even have a tile company from Mexico that distributes tile out of here. And they were going gangbusters because everybody's staying home doing home improvements. So there was a glitch briefly with two companies in our parks that were tied to General Motors, which shut down its North American operations for a while to try to control the pandemic. But they were up and running within 60 days. And the problem is, it's an ironic problem we have here. The demand is so great in automotive and electronics and what have you, and we're trying to keep up with that demand, but then tie that back to the labor issue. We have companies that are so frustrated because their orders are just killing them. They're trying to keep up with their orders, but they need more employees to be able to produce more. So it's kind of a catch-22 for a lot of companies.
Supply chains have been in the news quite a bit during the pandemic, and they continue to do so as well right now in the news. But I'd like to hear from you right now with what you're looking at. Is there any good news with the supply chains issue?
The good news is there's always the future. But right now, I mean, if you, I talked to people in the parks. I got off of the phone about an hour ago with one of our Border Industrial Association members that produces picture frames. And we were discussing how, I mean, some companies' logistics costs are up in the $25 million, $30 million range. In certain cases, a container coming from Asia to North America, the cost for that container, to ship that container, went from $2,500 to sometimes $25,000. So logistics are killing everybody. And also in the trucking industry, I have a good friend who owns a small little trucking company, and he's got 2 trucks, runs dairy grain feed, and he's paying $5,000 a week in diesel fuel, and it's killing him. So all of us are in the same boat. We've seen an escalation of prices due to the pandemic, pent-up demand, and this whole Russia, aggression thing. Hopefully, the supply catches up with demand, and that's what I'm counting on. But it's probably going to be several months before that occurs.
Now, you wrote in your column recently about the protest that was happening in Canada. I'd like to hear from you. Do you think the trucking industry is going to take a hit from that protest, and how other truckers in the United States have tried to sort of copycat that?
Well, yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, I know everybody has their own opinion on whether to get vaccinated for COVID or not, but times are already hard. Logistics are already strained. And to have these protests and blocking traffic, impeding trade between Canada and the United States is not what we want right now. I've written in my column that we have an opportunity to do a reset. We can bring business back from Asia that should be here anyway, strategic businesses that we don't want to lose control over. Now's not the time to create havoc or chaos between the United States, Canada, or the United States and Mexico. We have to present a very stable front for these businesses to come back and feel comfortable to invest millions here and stay here a while. So I was very worried about those protests because it shut down parts of Canada and it affected, I talked to companies here on the US-Mexico border and it was affecting them. So it's not just a localized factor, it affects globally.
Yeah, but I mean, what about the industry though? I mean, when local, state, federal governments start seeing this thing happening, are they going to say, hey, maybe we need to invest more in rail or air travel instead of trucking? Are those some possibilities?
It's not a possibility, it's a reality. Out of the last legislative session, we got a total of $72,700,000 in funding for projects here in Santa Teresa. 20 million of that total is going to be invested into the Santa Teresa jetport. Right now, we can land 737-300 cargo jets, which are the smaller 737s. But with the 20 million, further improvements are going to be made, and we hope to land 737-800s and 747s in the future. That's going to be a game changer for New Mexico and the border area. We will have clients moving cargo via air, and the only mode of transportation we will lack here in Santa Teresa and in New Mexico's border region is maritime shipping, which of course the Rio Grande is not going to support any kind of navigable, cargo. But we are very excited because that airport investment by the state legislature and the governor is really going to be a game changer.
Okay, I want to talk with you about the war in Ukraine. Because you've been writing about this, about Russia's invasion in Ukraine. You recently wrote that you did see this as an opportunity to reset. I'd like to hear from you. Why do you feel that this is an opportunity to reset with countries like China?
Well, particularly with China, China has not condemned Russia's aggression, and they've been a pipeline to allow Russia to keep up its invasion of Ukraine. I mean, before China invaded, Russia committed to increasing its grain imports from Russia, to give it a lifeline, and that's unacceptable. And China has been not a very good trade partner in the way it's operated, and that's why we're in a U.S.-China trade war with a tariff war right now. But we have an opportunity to reset our relationship with China in the sense that there's a lot of companies that are based in North America, or they're native Asian companies that don't want that turmoil, the supply chain mess, all this stuff, the war. It's better to be closer to your market, even if you're paying a little more. You control the stability of your supply chain, you control the quality of your product, your engineering, your R&D. And we need to really step up our game in getting in front of these companies that are prospects to bring to North America and particularly to New Mexico.
Now, you also wrote about in your column that the strength the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement could have played for the United States with this issue. Why so?
Well, the TPP, as that's called, was negotiated back in the Obama administration with countries in North America, Latin America, Asia, that were coming together to form a trade bloc, which took years to negotiate. And I thought it was great because I thought that was kind of a buffer against China, where we could all operate together democratically. Most countries are democratic in the negotiations, and we were about to get the agreement signed, and the Trump administration decided to pull out. I think in retrospect, that's a mistake. I think that trade group could have put a lot of pressure on China, because China wasn't one of the potential signatories to that. And we would have had a lot more leverage to say, hey, we're gonna trade fairly. You're gonna respect our patents and intellectual property. And when a crisis like this invasion of Ukraine occurs, we're gonna make you, for being very slow to condemn just brutal aggression, pay for that.
Now, there's been a lot of reporting just about how sensitive China is to its image. We've seen that play out in the media with Hollywood, professional athletes, as far as China flexing its economic strength with companies and brands. So how can trade negotiators in the U.S. Possibly use that to really address this issue?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, unlike Russia, Putin in Russia doesn't really care what his international image is. That's obvious. China is hypersensitive of projecting this image of peacefulness, stability, equality in society, when in reality, that's not the case. I mean, a lot of its own citizens are persecuted by the central government. This Ukrainian invasion offers us a chance to shame China for allowing and empowering Russia. It's not just on the trade side. We need more leaders saying, what's with you? I mean, this is terrible. This is a war that is senseless, and you are siding with an aggressor like this. And I think that China, and I've written in my column that when you have these kind of unholy alliances between dictators and autocrats, they come out and they profess a love for each other, as China did with Russia during the first day of the Olympics, by the way. Unlimited, relationship, I think is what they call it. That tends to fall apart over time. These dictators are very paranoid. They're scared of not only of their own people, but they're scared of other countries outside that might, take them out of power. So I think we have the obligation to speak out on a global level and condemn China for its behavior in this aggression.
Now, NPR recently reported that the European banks said that Russia's GDP will fall by 10% and Ukraine's by 20% this year. How does that economic impact affect what we're doing here in the U.S.?
So, well, not surprisingly, the U.S. doesn't do a lot of trade with Russia. We do some petroleum, we do some agriculture, what have you. Ukraine is a different matter. The Ukraine has been referred to traditionally as the world's breadbasket. It produces a lot of wheat and grains that the world consumes, particularly Eastern Europe. That vacuum, because of the destruction of production, destruction of crops, what have you, that's going on in this war, is an opportunity. I don't mean to be like a vulture or behave like a vulture saying this is good for the United States. I mean, obviously, this kind of a war is horrible, but it provides the United States producers with an opportunity to fill the void in Western and Eastern Europe with some of our crops and some of our raw materials and products that are not being made because of this war.
Okay, now one other thing that I'd like to talk with you about is that during this pandemic, during the supply chain issue, during trade wars, there's been a lot of discussion about the lack of manufacturing existing in the U.S. We're in an election year. Do you think that there's going to be a lot of candidates talking about bringing back manufacturing to the U.S.?
Oh, yes. Both the D's and R's are going to be talking about that. Bringing back, right now we have a Buy America campaign, which is good. I mean, that's good. We need to really rethink how we produce globally. The world changes. The whole concept of production sharing is how we create, for example, automobiles. The engine blocks might be made in Mexico, the electronics in the United States, the glass in Canada, components from Taiwan. That's all fine and dandy. But there's strategic industries, such as the automotive industry, such as the PPE industry, that we over time let go to nations that are not friendly to us. And we found out what happened in the pandemic is all of us were scrambling for surgical masks and gloves and sanitizer. That stuff needs to be here. And we as Americans, I've always said, it's one thing to say, let's support America. Let's bring this stuff back. Okay, but are we willing as Americans, as individual Americans, to pay a little more for this stuff, for our stability, for our security in the future? That is where the rubber hits the road. And I would hope that, and I know this term is used so loosely anymore, patriotic Americans will want to do exactly that.
Okay, Jerry Pacheco, president of the Border Industrial Association, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us on Newsmakers.
Thank you, Anthony.
That's our time for now. You can join us this week on KRWG Radio every weekday. It's morning edition, 5 to 9, Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now from noon to 2. And of course, All Things Considered from 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org. And we'd like to hear from you. You can always email us with your story ideas and video submissions. The address is at feedback@nmsu.edu. I'm Anthony Murnau. I hope you have a wonderful week. And don't forget, we're on social media. You can always like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to the KRWG News YouTube channel to stay updated with programs on KRWG Television.